Welcome to Canada's podcast. Hi there. I'm Phil Bliss, founder and CEO of Canada's podcast, coming to you today from Toronto. We're going to meet Shane Murphy, who's CEO of Owner, a venture of RBX that makes it easier and more affordable for businesses to incorporate, register, and competently handle ongoing legal compliance. Shane has almost a decade of experience as a lawyer and initially founded Technologies in 2017 as an innovative all-in-one technology platform that provided businesses with the ability to automate sophisticated legal tasks such as incorporations, equity management, and legal agreements. Founder was acquired by Owner in 2020, with Shane moving initially into the role of COO and now into the role of CEO. Yeah. So Shane, welcome to Canada's podcast. Great to meet you. So as I normally do, and I know you've listened to some of the podcasts, before you get too deep into conversation, why don't you first of all tell us a bit about who Shane Murphy is, what you do, and how you got here, basically. In 3 minutes.
Sounds good. Thanks so much for having me. First of all, Philip, I've really enjoyed getting to know the show, and you do a great job for entrepreneurs in Canada. So great to be here and great to meet you too. Shane Murphy, CEO of Owner. Owner is a venture that operates within RBC or RBCX, which is really the part of the Royal Bank of Canada, which is mandated to drive innovation and new initiatives. So what we do at Owner is we operate a bit like our own startup within the broader bank, and we help entrepreneurs register or incorporate a business. So I'll start by that, and then I'll get to your question, which is, who am I and where do I come from? So today I'm operating an online portal where entrepreneurs can register or incorporate their business. But it comes from my background as a lawyer. I practiced corporate law for about 6 or 7 years after finishing law school at McGill. And what I found from practicing law was that it's a really antiquated industry. It's probably maybe the most traditional career path you could possibly be on is being a lawyer. And I saw so many areas of law which were just very ripe for disruption. And I still have the utmost respect for the legal profession and lawyers. I'm still a member of the bar, but there's so many ways that technology can be a value add to the legal process, especially for small businesses, startups, entrepreneurs, because frankly, they don't have the money to pay for people like myself who were 6 or 7 years out of law school. Every year I was charging more on an hourly rate. There just had to be a better way for these early stage businesses to get that sort of legal support they needed. So the path to get from A to B was convoluted, and there was a lot of trial and error and pivoting, and I can get into all of the different iterations, but the short version is started a company which was called Founded Technologies. We found that sweet spot in helping startups get off the ground, getting them incorporated, getting a proper minute book set up, some of the early stage financing documents, helping them create those. So it wasn't me as a lawyer anymore. It was me operating a technology platform with a team of software engineers, helping really automate and streamline these processes. Eventually, we developed a commercial relationship with RBC because they realized that the minute you get incorporated, the next question is, how do I open a bank account? Where do I go? So we had that commercial partnership, and then the business really took off around early 2020, around the time of the pandemic. A lot of business owners were looking for new services to try online. People really open to online solutions. The business took off, and eventually we came to an agreement with RBC where they would acquire Founded. We merged the two companies together. That was about 3 years ago. And I was working as the chief operating officer in the merged Owner entity. And I just took over as CEO about 4 months ago. So I'm fairly new in the CEO chair, but still very enthusiastic about the work we do for entrepreneurs in Canada.
So you moved from a practice into a startup in the legal side, technology side of things, and then got snapped up by owner, if you like. Aren't you back to having more of a job versus being an entrepreneur, if I can ask that?
Well, there's certainly a lot more stability when you have the largest and oldest bank in the country at your back. But luckily, I've been given enough independence within RBCX and as the leader and owner that it still feels like a startup. It still feels like I have an ambitious mandate to grow this business. Absolutely. Like, yeah, to be totally frank about it, running a startup was the most stressful thing in my life that I've experienced, because I had the financial stability of a job at a law firm to zero, and everything was on me to kind of make sure myself, my partners, my employees could pay the bills. Now, yeah, some of that financial stress is off, absolutely, but then the mission is still there. So as long as the mission is still there, I think that's enough of a spark that kind of keeps me engaged and excited about this.
So maybe we can sort of talk about where you are and getting to see a bunch of entrepreneurs, entrepreneurial businesses, in what are fairly demanding times. Some sort of perspective you can give entrepreneurs out there in terms of what that entrepreneurial climate, if you like, is from nevertheless, yes, it may be a very venture innovative side of RBC, but it's still RBC. So where are you guys looking at it and seeing things that are positive versus negative, if you like?
Yeah, it's a really good question, because I think it almost like asks, what are we talking about when we talk about entrepreneurship and the startups and small business? We use these terms sort of interchangeably, but there's a big difference between the typical small business owner and a scaling tech company. And I'm really here to serve Canadian small business owners. I think is the niche we've found. Like at Owner, we've incorporated or registered about 135,000 businesses across Canada to date. So it's an impressive number, but most of those businesses are not scaling tech companies. We're talking about a lot of trades people. So your electricians, your plumbers.
Yeah, important entrepreneurs.
They're 1,000%. These are Canadian entrepreneurs. That's the core of what we're talking about. So to kind of get back to your question, like these business owners, these solopreneurs, micro businesses, they've been through hell and back in the last 3 years, navigating COVID. It's never been easy to run a small business, but it's been incredibly challenging. And I think it's added to their skill set and their adaptability in the last few years. So we recently ran a survey across the country of entrepreneurs. We surveyed about 1,000 entrepreneurs as sort of a check-in. And the funny thing is, despite the current like macro environment with high interest rates, inflation, everything that they're dealing with, there's a surprising amount of optimism right now that we're seeing with these entrepreneurs. And going back, like the small business owner, micro businesses, I think they really feel like they've been through the worst of it. And now, despite all the challenges, they are ready to turn the corner. They see light at the end of the tunnel and are really ready for to grow, thrive, and invest in their businesses. So from our temperature check, entrepreneurs are doing okay now. They've partially because they've been through so much. It couldn't get any worse, but they are saying that they've found a way to adapt to the challenges of inflation and high interest rates. So we think that the next couple of years will be good for entrepreneurs, and having technology tools and learning new skills to operate online, kind of modernizing their businesses through COVID, has really given them that boost to kind of move to hopefully some stability in the coming years.
Yeah. So I mean, can you with the sort of the present, you've got such a large picture of the present. Can you give us some perspective of what, you know, what do you see about, that's exciting about the future of entrepreneurship in Canada, obviously?
Yeah, I think kind of to build on what I was saying about new tools and just that it's never really been easier to start a small business. So there is something that's like a golden age of entrepreneurship happening because you can with all these tools ranging from Square for payments or QuickBooks for bookkeeping, and of course like Owner for incorporation. There's just like so many ways that you can quickly and affordably set up and manage your business. So I think now that those tools have become kind of mainstream in a way where they used to be niche and reserved for tech companies and tech people, having that democratized in a way is making people more confident in starting a business, and entrepreneurship becoming a little bit more like a profession and something where I think in the kind of the old days, it was like the ambitious prodigal sons and daughters would be the doctors, the lawyers, the engineers. I think now it's very very mainstream, very acceptable, and encouraged to start a business, give it a shot. And that I think is a cultural shift that comes partially just from how quickly and easily you can spin up a business and get started.
Canada's podcast, the #1 podcast for entrepreneurs by entrepreneurs. And tell me a bit about Owner, because it's interesting. I mean, you said you help people start up. Do you do any more than that? I mean, you're I mean, your parent is a financial powerhouse. So I mean, do you connect the dots? I guess that's what I'm saying.
Absolutely. That's a lot of the reason why RBC was so interested in this, getting into this business of registration and incorporation, because it's almost like a series of questions that small business owners ask themselves. First of all, like, what is my business? What am I going to do? Second of all, how do I incorporate or register that business? Third might be, where am I going to bank that business? How do I open a bank account for it? So that's, to answer that question, that is our streamlined account opening process. So once you incorporate on Owner, we have a clear pipeline inside the platform where you can open your RBC banking account. But we're always pushing ourselves to go deeper and get to more innovative solutions. So we just recently, like 6 weeks ago, roughly launched Owner Insurance, which is a sub product within the Owner platform. But this is a way for a small business owner to get an instant quote for insurance for their business, customized for the type of business they're operating. So we match them to the right insurance product, give them a quote for that insurance product on the spot. That might not sound revolutionary when I say it out loud, but it was actually really hard for early micro businesses and small businesses to get insurance in the past, because insurance agents and brokers weren't really catering towards this market. They were sort of like, wait till you have a clearer risk profile, a couple of years of operating, then we'll talk about the right insurance product for you. But we can now match you with insurance the day you incorporate to get started. So it's a huge boost for entrepreneurs. And that's why I think insurance is, again, it's just one more example of where we can go. The next questions, we can go down the list of things that entrepreneurs will be asking as they grow and develop their business. I think we'll be offering more products in the future that match those needs. So Owner's more than just getting started. It's about making your business more successful and getting the support we can offer.
What's the greatest challenge you faced in as you stepped into entrepreneurship, if you like?
Yeah, there's such a steep learning curve. You can study this stuff academically all you want, and you still won't know exactly how the market is going to respond to your business once it's up and running. So I'll provide an anecdote, but the first business I launched, quit my job as a lawyer, and I, with my 2 business partners who are close friends and still work with me, but we launched, effectively, it was Uber for lawyers. We called it Law Scout, but it was a very simple interface where you could describe the service that you're looking for a legal service, be it incorporation, a shareholder agreement, whatever it is, and we would match you with a lawyer who would deliver that service for a fixed fee rate. That's what I thought was going to be my business on day one. It was a marketplace. There's inherent challenges to building a marketplace business. You have the whole chicken and egg issue about, do we have enough lawyers? Do we have enough consumers? But anyway, that was where I started, and where I ended up. Where am I? 7 or 8 years later, I'm now operating the business within RBC, something I never anticipated at all when I started that sort of Uber for lawyers idea. So I think really, I can't emphasize enough the idea of the journey of the entrepreneur, the idea that you have to seize opportunities that are presented to you as they come up. And your question was more about the challenges, but I think the challenge is in a lot of ways to let go of what you thought was your brilliant idea and the way you thought you were going to thrive. Being able to put that aside and saying, no, there's an opportunity here that's where the long-term journey is taking me, and I'm going to pursue that opportunity. It's a fine balance between being focused and committed to your plan, but also being able to adapt when opportunities arise. So if you get that fine balance wrong, you can either be pursuing every little idea that comes your way, and then you have no core value or core business. Or if you're too focused on what you thought was your initial plan, you don't get to pivot and adapt and seize opportunities that arise. So that was the challenge in a long-winded way. That's what I've kind of come to realize. You have to navigate that.
Well, again, you're looking at a lot of new businesses at the moment, and leave out the owner piece of it. What advice would you give an entrepreneur looking to start a business in 2023, 24?
It is a tough time to start a business. I think that is for sure. I feel like I almost started out at a time where startups were just catching on, and Airbnb and Uber were sort of new ideas, and there was a lot of enthusiasm. There's a little bit more skepticism about startups specifically. So I'll talk mainly about like tech startups, where I've kind of spent most of my time. So when I started out, you honestly didn't need to think about making money. There was quite a free flow of venture capital at the time, which was just based on growth. So now that is completely out of fashion. It's, you can't walk into a room with a grow mindset without thinking about core income for your business, profitability. You need to have these discussions earlier. So I think really, and especially with the uncertainty we're seeing right now, if I was to start a business from scratch at the moment, I would look at making sure that the business was sustainable early, even at the expense of growth. I would prove it on a sustainability basis, and then grow with caution, just because I'm not going to make any predictions about the economy, despite seeing signs of optimism. I would say make sure the business is sustainable, then the right people will notice, and you can talk about growth at that point. But I wouldn't jump ahead to that grow at all costs mindset, because there's too much uncertainty, and you'll be just too dependent on outside money, and potentially too diluted to even succeed should you come to the point where you could exit that business.
Well, what's the best piece of advice that you've received, that you keep going back to, kind of thing?
It's a very good question. I hate to be stumped, but there's
It's okay.
There's really there's not one single piece of advice I can say I go back to all the time. I think usually I think surrounding myself with good people, creative people, and optimistic people has been probably the key. And they're telling me things all the time that that kind of motivate me and keep me going.
That's a great thought. I mean, it's a really important thought, I think. So
I've been very lucky on that since day one to find not necessarily formal mentors. I think people often look for a mentor who will save them somehow and provide wisdom from above. But it's really just about being in an environment where there's smart, interesting, creative people who can inspire you. And I've always managed to, from being in a co-working space by serendipity, surrounded by good people, having great co-founders, early stage employees who were just like on board from day one. That's been a real benefit to me, apart from any nuggets of advice I can kind of come up with at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's move on to some lighter questions instead of okay, which I ask everybody. What book are you currently reading or listening to, or whatever? And what have you read recently that you would recommend and as something that's definitely worth a read?
Great questions. So I'm currently reading a book called Scaling People. This is I actually read quite a lot of fiction, but this is very on topic because it's a book, Scaling People, by Claire Hughes Johnson, was formerly at Stripe for I believe chief operating officer at Stripe for quite some time as they were getting their business going. So it is the single most practical book I think I've ever read about running an organization. And as the title says, scaling people. Really, as your organization grows and you have more people, how do you keep a team aligned? How do you set goals that make sense? How do you get integrity and credibility as a leader? Really enjoying this book. Very much like almost like a textbook. You can just kind of flip through various chapters and get suggestions for things like how to run a one-on-one with an employee you feel like is underperforming. How do you, like, what are some strategies for doing that? We all end up in that situation. So a great book for, I wouldn't say I agree with 100% of it, but just to be able to pick that up and brainstorm almost with someone who's been through it all, it seems like, has been great. So that's currently what I'm reading. Another business book that I really enjoyed, that's been around for a little bit longer, called So Good They Can't Ignore You, by Cal Newport, who's fairly well known for his sort of time management and personal organization kind of guru. Deep work, sort of his big concept. So Good They Can't Ignore You. I really enjoyed that because it what he encourages in a nutshell is taking almost like the view of your career as a trade, no matter what you're doing, but really like looking at what are the skills you need to thrive in your career. Focus on developing and building those skills, and then get so good at those skills that you won't be ignored. I feel like too many people are sitting around waiting for, wait till the CEO notices me, or wait, if I play enough golf with somebody, they'll give me a job. I love just parking all that and just focusing on skills development in a real and deliberate way. So that was an interesting one. I've recommended it to a few of my team members here at Owner, but just get so good that they can't ignore you, and your career will be in good shape. So liked that one a lot too. But again, I could go on. I try to always,
okay.
I try to have one business book and one fiction book in front of me at all times. So, but those were two that I've really been enjoying lately.
Yeah. Are you a morning or a night person?
Very much a morning person. Earlier the better.
Yeah. Okay. Most of us entrepreneurs are, but there are exceptions. So that's fine. And if you had to pick one word to describe Shane Murphy, what would it be? And why would you choose that word?
But I'd probably prefer someone else and get to provide that word and get their opinion. But off the top of my head, I think I've always loved adventure. So it sounds a little self-aggrandizing, and but adventurous, I would take as quite a compliment, because adventure, like a venture, is something I've always tried to pursue, whether it was my legal career or my business. I like to think that these are all different adventures.
And what's keeping you up at night?
Well, if you mean that in a business way, not too much. I think overall, this is a very high performing team. The business doesn't keep me up at night. There's always something to do next. But I I could provide a literal answer. I have a dog that has been keeping me up at night, but that's a whole other story. I think it's a summer heat or something. It's the literally an issue last night where the dog kept me up all night, but that's probably not. No, I feel like I'm always I am always thinking about ways to build the business and to keep this team together and basically keep the employees aligned and happy with their jobs here. It's something that honestly I'm sleeping well, but always thinking about ways that we can make that better.
Shane, I'd like to thank you for coming on. It's been great meeting you, and it's an interesting venture you're involved in. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Phil. Real pleasure to chat with you.
So, I'm Phil Bliss, and once again, thanks for listening to Canada's podcast, where you meet entrepreneurs that are driving the Canadian economy. Talk to you soon. Canada's podcast, the #1 podcast for entrepreneurs by entrepreneurs.